Hello, everyone. Welcome to Impulsive Hobby Pursuits. My name is Jeff, the Impulsive Hobbyist. I have some friends here with me today to talk about Loki. I have Diamondjab as well as Propsofprophecy. We're going to kind of talk about the fifth episode that we watched and then our kind of take on the series as a whole and kind of where we see it going from here. So the fifth episode was it was a doozy. We just actually got done watching it just now. We watched it together because we're a team. And I would say it is probably my favorite episode so far. I mean, Tom Hiddleston had said the fourth and fifth were his favorites. I can see why. So I guess like, what were some standout parts of the episode for you guys?
I mean, I said it almost immediately when we started kind of watching that Loki had a very different tone, not just the way it was written or the way it was shot, but just music wise. Like the music I remember for Falcon and Winter Soldier was very much in the vein of Captain America, but if you listen closely, it's just a copy of the Civil War soundtrack. So it doesn't really deviate too far from a lot of the certain notes here, but Loki is just so above and beyond from a soundtrack standpoint what WandaVision was bringing to the table, because it was so thematically timed to where it was at that point. But the music sets the tone for episode 5. It is phenomenal. The only reason why I will watch it again is the music. It's so good.
I think, to be fair, the music throughout this entire show has been phenomenal.
Very good. Yeah.
Whoever picked all of this, they need a promotion.
Well, so from something I read, and I think I told you this, Props, is that for the pitch, that the showrunner, she actually played the theremin and a couple of the songs on the theremin during the pitch. Like that's how hardcore she knew kind of what she wanted for the show. And I think for something with Marvel, you kind of have to have that. You have to have that exactly what you want, right? And I think here is obvious some very specific choices, especially music-wise, shot-wise. The CG, I would say, in this particular episode was probably some of the best from the Marvel TV shows so far.
Oh yeah.
This felt like Ragnarok.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like WandaVision doesn't really use, I mean, it uses it to some extent, but it's very practical in its effects, especially early on, because the sets were built intentionally to kind of look like that. So there's a little bit of CG, there's not a lot. And Falcon and Winter Soldier, if you think about like the final episode of that series, it's all at night. Like there's only one room, I think, where they fight in the entire set piece with color, and that's at the beginning of the episode when Falcon shows up, but they're fighting in a room with like red emergency lights. So there's really no other, like everything else it's pitch black in the entire episode. And it's again much easier to do CG when you have darker colors than when you have lighter ones. But I have to appreciate the fact that Loki kind of stuck with a color, which was this weird, like toned down, rugged grayish green hue. For the space that they were in, the void that they were at. So like, but then when any other color came on the screen, it just kind of pops, right? The purple from Alioth, the green from, we'll talk about it a little bit, but like Asgard, and everything just kind of hits with a bit of color, which is really nice.
Yeah. So let's kind of get into it. Okay. So let's kind of go over the show so far first before we get into the episode. We kind of knew what we were getting into, or thought we knew what we were getting into with Loki, with the Time Variance Authority, with kind of what we were going to see happen. In the first 4 episodes, what were the most surprising things that you saw that happened in these episodes? For me, I thought my view of things, and we hit a little on this in this episode, but I thought we would see more like Loki variants via time travel. I thought there was going to be more of that going on. Now we do see more variants, but not necessarily by time travel in and of itself. What were the more surprising things for you guys?
I went in pretty much not having any expectations, so I wasn't really surprised by anything.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, they set it up pretty early when they were just like, "There's going to be a whole bunch of weird stuff," and I was like, "Okay, I expect weird stuff." I I got an alligator Loki, and I like that they're just like, "I'm not even going to ask." And it's like, but I do kind of like Loki's in that when they're talking, he's like, "Nobody cares about my story," and Loki's like, I care," and I'm like, so do I, so do I.
Yeah, right,
But
right,
can
right.
we go into alligator Loki?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
what variant creates that?
No,
No,
they,
it's like
no.
they go into that twice when Sylvie shows up, and he's just like, "Yeah," and there's an alligator Loki. It's best not
Best
to ask.
No one has any questions on Crocodile Thor, lizard Frigga. No questions on what that
Is
that
everybody an
reptilian
animal?
family tree kind of look like.
And did
Is
They
Iron Man
don't
like a
really
monkey?
know.
so here's my question. So
It's like
there's
the
an
Beast Wars
offhanded
of Marvel.
there's an offhanded line that says, he got snapped up because he ate the wrong neighbor's cat. So the question is, did he become alligator Loki because someone cursed him because he was a humanoid Loki and he ate a cat, or was he already alligator Loki and he ate a cat and then the TVA ate him?
I like the Beast Wars concept. I like that there's an entire Marvel universe in which the cinematic universe happens the exact same way, but everyone is animals. So like the scene where Loki is walking through the crowd of people and he's telling them all to kneel, and then Cap shows up. That's just alligator Loki just walking through the crowd, just growling.
I want Captain Kangaroo.
Is Rocket Raccoon a human?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't
Like
know.
everybody else is an animal, and Rocket Raccoon is just like, I'm a dude.
Could you imagine if Rocket Raccoon was just a person who was experimented on by animals? So he's just a fully grown human with the divots in his back.
So
It's
but
just
listen to
Bradley
this.
Cooper.
So that would mean that Groot would probably be made of rocks and Korg would be a tree.
Would be a tree. I am Korg. We are Korg.
Korg. Korg.
So, in all honesty, though, in terms of like what took me by surprise, I have to agree. Like when they said to expect craziness, I was like, okay, I'm down. I will say I agree with you that when I'm surprised that when Sylvie's plan, I didn't feel like had a closed outcome. So what I mean by that is in this what is it, the second episode, they go to the Roxxon kind of supermarket, the Rox Cart kind of supermarket, and that's what it might be the first episode. They run into Sylvie for the first time. And Sylvie's plan is to take a bunch of reset charges and send them to different points in the sacred timeline and just kind of blow them up, right? So now we have all of these kind of branching kind of timelines. So my original thought when I saw that was, oh, this is going to be the foundation for the multiverse of madness. Sylvie's just created everything. And I think the thing that takes me by surprise is that internally I went, no, that doesn't seem like it's the case. But we never go back to like if the TVA fixed that, or like if that was solved at any point,
or if that's how we got.
So like
Don
it's just
Cheadle.
something that's So like wow, Terrence Howard was a deviant, a variant.
So my dream would have been that when the charges were released, we'd get like this back shot of Terrence Howard's head, so you wouldn't even need to use his likeness, right? Just back shot it, boom, and maybe it's the scene from the courtroom. They CG something that looks like Terrence Howard, the courtroom from Iron Man 2. You see the charge drop, boom, it flashes, turn around, and it's Don Cheadle. That would have been
TVA
so
shows up, they pull him out, they put the reset charge, and that's when Don Cheadle walks into the courtroom.
right, yeah.
Afterwards,
and they could they could do the same with Edward Norton.
Yeah. So I guess that's part of my surprise is that I feel like I was not too smart, but I was 5 steps above what the show was telling me.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go from 3 phases of Marvel films, by the time you get to the third one, we are obsessing over every intricate detail
every
to figure
detail.
out
Yeah.
what the next experience is going to be. All of a sudden, phase 4 comes around, and there's no foundation, right? There's no status. Everything is new, connecting to something that's new. So now we reset, right? We're back in phase 1 where we're trying to figure out what Avengers is going to look like. You know what I mean? So
Who's the new Thanos?
I'm still in phase 3 mentality instead of embracing the material that's in front of me and figuring out what it looks like.
Yeah.
So that was my surprise, was like having to reel myself back and be like, oh, that's going to do this and this is going to do that, and being like, not yet.
And I think that's where a lot of people might be disappointed. Like I know I said it while we were watching the episode. I was like, Alia, or however you say it. That's got to be. It's got to be Kang.
He looks like a lion. It's got to be Kang.
Yeah,
Kang and lions.
And here's the thing: is that I could be totally wrong. I probably am, and it's the same with like everyone thought Mephisto was in WandaVision. We can't assume that there's going to be another Thanos. I think Marvel would be retreading the ground they've already done if Kang was going to be another Thanos, and if they introduced him this early, like they introduced Thanos fairly early in in Avengers, right? I think this would be super early to introduce, and so while I was totally like, yes, it's 100% Kang, it's going to be Kang. It would be completely understandable if it was not. And I just hope they can stick the landing.
I think the other thing to remember is that the Russo brothers had a term when they were doing the Avengers films that I loved, which was strange chemistry. And the purpose of Infinity War and Endgame was to take characters that we weren't familiar with, seeing them together and actually seeing how they would interact with one another. So seeing Nebula and War Machine go to a location is strange chemistry, right? To figure out how that kind of manifests itself. I do wonder, and I might be doing this again, the thing that I just said I should stop doing. I do wonder if one of Feige's comments really early on was that we didn't necessarily wanted a big bad, but we wanted a lot of really small, cohesive plot points that culminated in their own narratives. So a lot of people took that as every movie was going to be individualized, but I do wonder if Kang is going to be a big bad, but not for the entire kind of gambit of characters, that he is the big bad for what could be strange chemistry. Ant-Man in Quantumania and Loki with this seemingly kind of similarity in terms of the ground that they're covering that's time related. So while Kang might not be in Falcon and Winter Soldier, he's the big bad for this subsection of the universe. And that I think is inherently more interesting, right? The idea that these characters that we may never get to see interact with one another interact in a way where it creates a very interesting kind of plot device, or an interesting narrative, or an interesting timeline, so to say.
Mm-hmm. I like that thought, though, that whereas he may not be the overarching villain, that it would be a narrative that is connected.
Exactly.
So, and I think that would be their way of keeping that anticipation, that like, because that's what we loved about it, right? Everything's connected, but doing it on a smaller scale. I think that could be more successful without retreading, as I said earlier, that ground of that Thanos tread, you know?
Kang might not be the villain for Shang-Chi, right? Yeah. It's very unrelated. So throwing Shang-Chi in there might come off as out of left field, but there are clear-cut threads that could lead to these characters from a TV show and a film interconnecting with one another, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes it interesting, regardless of the outcome, is that the rogues gallery of villains that Marvel is starting to introduce are such high quality that they can be placed in a wide variety of positions without worrying about, well, is it adaptable, right? Kang could absolutely be in a Loki TV show because it's believable depending on how they write it, right? So,
yeah. All right, so let's focus. Let's kind of focus on the episode that we just watched. That's episode 5, and it was called "Journey into Mystery," wasn't it?
Yep.
Which is a title that Loki has actually been in, and in the comics as well as Thor. So this is a nice title for the episode, but pretty much starts out, right where we left off, right at that end credit scene. We get a little bit of the TVA, but then very very quickly we're brought right to where Loki left off, where he woke up with his new best friends, if we would say, which are four at this point variants. We have Boastful Thor, and we found out very quickly why he was called that. Then we have Kid Loki, and we have Classic Loki. What was that? Boastful? Right?
Boastful Loki?
Or Boastful Loki.
Boastful
sorry.
Loki.
I said Thor.
Okay,
Apologies. It's the hammer.
He had a hammer. It's easy to get confused.
But Boastful Loki, Kid Loki, Classic Loki, and Alligator Loki, which we're kind of still on the fence of, is it an actual Loki? I'd like to think it is. But I love the quick introduction that only I think could be pulled off by Richard E. Grant, where he gets up and Loki obviously has all these questions. Where am I? What's going on? What's happening? Who are you? And he's, very quickly lays it out for him. And he goes, this
what are we doing?
Void.
We're not dying.
Yeah. This is the void. That is Alioth or Alioth. And where it's lunch.
Yeah.
Time to start moving.
Really got right into it, right? So we expected it to be moving fast, and it was almost immediately. What were you guys' take on it kind of the beginning, meeting these new characters, which we kind of only get for one episode that we're aware of?
Yeah, Richard E. Grant has a line that I love, which is that Loki's always survive. We are survivors. That's what we do. And I think these Lokis they play such a pivotal role in trying to understand, or at least catch the viewer up to where this Loki is in his journey. Because I remember really early on in the show, I had to remind myself that this is 2012 Loki. This is not mine. That the Loki I'm seeing in episode 1 and 2 is a villain. That's what he is. And then he slowly takes a very different journey to potentially end in the same point that my Loki ended at in Avengers Infinity War, right? Where he's this weird kind of anti-hero, right? He does heroic things, but you still can't trust him. He's very much in a weird space. And so as he's evolving, these other Lokis are almost like reminders of what makes a Loki, that some of them hide, some of them have killed people, right? So Kid Loki, they say, hey, what was your Nexus event? He goes, I killed my Thor. That was my Nexus event, right? So there are these weird kind of pseudo reminders of what the predetermined aspects of time that the TVA have kind of established makes a Loki. And it almost positions this idea that, and they say it a little later on, that Loki's never change. And even when we try to change, it just gets worse. That there's no reason for us to change or to be good or to be inherently neutral, that we are evil. And anytime we've tried to alter that, it ends up with us in the void. And I just thought it was interesting, the role that they played in the show, to kind of poke holes in whether or not the Loki that we're watching, that the journey has been worth it for them. And to try to separate for the viewer, to really put 2018 Loki in the dust, like to really kind of put it in our rear view mirror and say, this is the one that we're traveling with, that we're experiencing with. And are we willing to accept this Loki as potentially a hero or someone who could do some good? And you start to hear that dialogue, like Loki in the show starts talking about, like, they have like a group meeting and there's this Avengers style wide shot. And so like there's all the way that it's presented is that this Loki could be the hero that we want him to be.
Mm-hmm. Props. What was your take on the beginning and just the introduction of these new characters? How did you receive them?
Well, I mean, we talked about it previously about how apparently the shot and how he woke up and everything was very intentional for the way it was done in the end of the Avengers, so that like him being surrounded by characters, one of which looks very Thorish, was shot very intentionally to be an homage to that final scene in the Avengers movie when Loki wakes up and he goes, "I'll take that drink now," kind of thing, right? But it was very, like Joe said, very Avengers-ish. There was even, I mean, we joked about it during the showing, that wide shot that had all the backs of all of them, and there's just Sylvie, and I was like, oh look, there's still one token female.
Some things never change, even in Loki's nightmares, you know.
Right? But as far as the characters go, like I loved classic Loki. Like I like the way he interacted and was acted, and the story when he's just like, we're all pieces of poop, and I realized that. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to subtract myself out of the equation. Just went to this random backwater world and hung out there until I got lonely, and then when I thought about leaving, the TVA showed up. Like, okay. But there were a lot of like really human moments. So I will say this. I said I wasn't really surprised. I was a little bit surprised. Like the humanity that happened in a lot of these characters, classic Loki and between our Loki or 2012's Loki and Sylvie, like the really like human connection moments are really well done. And I'm still a little bit weirded out because it's him attracted to him, but her.
Well, so like think about that for a second. Like, could Loki fall in love with anyone other than himself? Like that just it might just be me, but that is the one plot that makes sense to me.
I'm not saying it doesn't make sense.
And from what we could see,
weird when you think about it.
She is fundamentally mentally in a very different headspace than Loki. As far as like, I still think her Nexus event was, and we've conversed about this, was the fact that she saw Valkyries as a hero, as something to emulate. So she might have, and she had empathy for when she got pulled into the TVA and was like, help that man. That she was on a road to becoming someone who is totally un-Loki like, who is more of a out and out hero rather than Loki's villain or even anti-hero. So their headspaces are different. And I'm not saying they're different people, because technically they aren't. Which, yes, weird. But again,
I think the framework from Game of Thrones has prepared everyone to be too okay with stuff like this. Everyone's like, oh, brother and sister.
However, I will say this. I do find it interesting that the evil Loki from 2012 would experience these things, meet Sylvie, and grow some type of attraction to someone, because this isn't the Loki that's been softened. Mm-hmm. It's the Loki that's been softened by the experiences of the show, but it's not the Loki that was softened to be prepared for a potential relationship with someone, right? So how would he like the aspects? Like I remember he says, "Well, I trust her." There's nothing about 2012 Loki that would make you think that he trusts anyone at all. But he's able to build this in some way, shape, or form. So like that, I think, is the part that I find the most interesting about this Loki and his journey, especially interacting with other Lokis. He has this hug with Mobius later in the episode, where like this Loki has been severely softened by what's transpired. And I think the question becomes, do you buy that? If you were to watch Avengers and then immediately watch Loki, would you buy that transition for that character to get to this point?
So I think for me, what really is telling is that in this episode, he says days or months. I don't know how long it's been since New York. So my thing is, we don't know how much time Loki's had to ruminate on anything in his head, right? So we assume that it was like from one episode to the next. I got my variant jacket. I got my, tie and shirt from the TVA. We don't know how long it took from that first episode to that second episode. It could have been days. It could have been weeks. It could have been, months, as he said. We just don't know. And so that could be just a way for him to ruminate on kind of everything he's gone through, everything he's seen, especially because he saw what he probably shouldn't have seen, which was his full, what was supposed to be future, and the fact that he does soften in that there is that room for those emotions there, and so maybe that it made him more open and more apt to be able to evolve into this person that we're seeing now.
Yeah, I don't know if these variant Lokis work if this Loki doesn't go through this type of emotional kind of arc.
Well, I mean, just in that arc that we were seeing in Tom Hiddleston's Loki, Richard E. Grant's Loki kind of goes through it in the episode that we watch.
Yeah.
Goes from the one moment that I wanted to reach out and see if my brother missed me because I missed him. Was told that was wrong and that's a Nexus event, and I got pulled in, right? And I got taken in. So anytime I try and reach out, I get my hand slapped or I hurt someone unintentionally, that Loki sees this Loki going through this evolution, and then like towards the end you see he's having second thoughts of what it means to help, and I always think it's there's a thought that if at least one Loki survives, then Loki in and of himself survives, right? And that's why I think Richard E. Grant's Loki was okay doing what he did.
Yeah, I really liked his earlier one. He's just like, and for what? Glorious purpose? And like he's just given up on it. And then that last line when he's about to get consumed, he's like, glorious purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the title of the first episode in the show is Glorious Purpose, and it's so interesting. I almost wonder if this entire show was written around that line. Like they went back and they watched Avengers 2012 and they listened to him give that speech about glorious purpose, and to kind of see that, and then to see variants like Sylvie and a classic Loki and Kid Loki all have their own perceptions on glorious purpose. Even Mobius at one point or another like jokes about the concept of glorious purpose, makes fun of the concept of glorious purpose. So it's really interesting to see how this Loki's perception on glorious purpose is evolving, and maybe that gets to the heart of what I was saying before, this idea that do you believe the growth that this Loki has had if his definition on glorious purpose is constantly being challenged by the events of what's happening in front of him? And now you get Richard E. Grant's character who took me on a journey without needing any screen time prior to this episode.
Yeah.
He's only in this episode. That's it. He's not in the old ones. He's not in the new ones. But the portrayal of what happened in the past, why he's there in the present, why he considers the void his home, and then the decision he makes at the end is such a powerful 40 minutes of acting. It just shows why Richard E. Grant's one of the best.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've always thought Richard E. Grant has the ability to be in any movie or TV show for a minimal amount of time and make the greatest impact. It's an amazing feat that any character actor would want. But seriously, like when I looked at so when we watched this, we were all we were FaceTiming together, and I saw everyone's look on their face when he showed up and he did his I'm gonna replicate all of Asgard, which was, by the way, the strongest feat I think we've seen out of a Loki thus far.
Out of a Loki, yeah.
Yeah, without being augmented in some way.
I thought for a moment he was going to summon like Asgard's armies.
Oh, that would have
for
been
a moment. Like I thought he was just going to summon, and then all these tiny soldiers would be running around. And I mean, it was already mind blowing to begin with, but it's an incredible scene. It's one of the best.
And you just see the determination in his face, and then you hear, and if you listen, you know, as he's doing this, and he sees Alioth coming over to him, or Alioth, he yells, like for them to do what you need to do, and that's just, it's such a great character moment, to where this Loki is again just saying, like, he's kind of old, he's bitter, he's been in isolation, and finally he sees people fighting for what they believe in, and it happens to be Loki's, and earlier in the episode, you could tell his character doesn't understand the whys behind what they're doing, but he sees that to them it's worth it, and he tries to help out. Now, what I thought was interesting, though, is that leaves Kid Loki free to come back.
By himself with Alligator Loki.
With Alligator Loki.
Doing something. I don't know what. One other thing about that, think about classic Loki's timeline. He chooses to create a projection of himself that Thanos kills that isn't him. He floats in space, lands on a planet, and then goes into isolation for what we could perceive as a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, he's an Asgardian.
So he looks the way he looks now.
Thousands of years, yeah.
Potentially. The thing I find most interesting about that is, think about the dichotomy between classic Loki's isolationism and Thor's isolationism in Endgame. Because Thor's isolationism is with people, right? He's got Korg. He builds a pseudo Asgard, but he isolates himself from the people that he experienced Infinity War with. So his isolation is just with heroes, but he's still with people. And he ends up kind of in a really weird headspace, and people have to bring him back. To the Avengers kind of comparison, I think it's incredible that classic Loki isolates himself in a similar way. The TVA pulls him back in, and his next experience of companionship isn't with a Thor that he missed. It's with another Loki. It's with 4 other Lokis, only to then be with another Loki that defines his purpose. It's just to look at like how that all kind of comes together. It's really interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think I love the fact that we got those stories, and I was like, to be fair, classic Loki's is who I wanted to know the most about, and I think I said this to you, Brian, that for Loki to be that old, there has to be a story behind it. And yes, it was a very straightforward story, but it was a story that showed the humanity in that classic Loki. Because that classic Loki, he could have done the illusion thing, and then hid for a little bit, and then once Thanos was out of the picture, totally been a bad guy again, right? Or totally just done whatever he wanted, but he was like, you know what? I hurt people. That is what happens. So I am going to take myself out of the equation. I'm not going to be a part of it. Which shows us that at that point in time, that Loki really actually cared, you know? And so that there might be a seed of that in every Loki. I don't know about Kid Loki, because he just out and out killed a kid Thor, I would imagine, but who knows?
But he seemed less evil. Like he seemed like he was in charge, which I thought was interesting. But the Kid Loki was the core Loki, probably by dint of having killed his Thor.
I would think also probably because classic Loki is just kind of over it. Like, I don't want to be in charge.
Right. Yeah, I don't think you want to be in charge. But the Kid Loki, like, even he was just like, you're different. You know, what do we do about that? And then said, okay, well, we're going to go with your plan for this. And that's it. Like,
Mhm.
It does
Like-
show that there's a lot of similarities between the Lokis that Kid Loki must have seen. And we don't even know the history of what took place in the Void. There's President Loki, there's this weird like scavenger
Steampunk.
Loki who's just got a bunch of trash on him, and like, yeah, the steampunk one where he's got these big ass goggles and this helmet, he's walking around with a pipe. There's a bunch of Lokis in this episode. That's the one thing we haven't talked about, is this weird like this history of like these Lokis were in hiding. President Loki's been looking for them, and then he finds them, and they all kind of betray one another in this really funny like Loki backstabbing fest. So it just it lends to the idea, perhaps, of what you're talking about, this idea that every Loki that's come into the Void has a very similar quality to them.
Yeah.
That Kid Loki could go, huh, you're different. I don't know what it is. You're not the same.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, Props, you're also correct in that it seems like maybe Kid Loki might be a little remorseful about Thor, or at least not totally evil, when he literally states, anytime we do try and change something about us, we're captured, we're put in the Void, and all of this. So that makes sense that maybe he has seen the error of his ways, or maybe his Thor was evil. Maybe that's why he killed his Thor. Who knows? I mean, we don't know how the timelines diverged.
We don't know if it's an
Could be.
accident. Like,
Yeah, right. Could have been an
like
accident.
he could have accidentally have killed his Thor. You know, they were playing a game and tripped Thor down a canyon, and Thor
Yeah.
fell down a well, and Timmy couldn't rescue him.
Or maybe he
whatever.
went with that scene where he was a snake and he knows I like snakes, and boom, he stabbed me. Maybe he stabbed him in a place that wasn't able to be healed. Right?
I don't know.
But I
We'll
guess
probably never know.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I guess the biggest thing coming from this episode, so at the end, I guess we're skipping the kind of end here, but at the end they come up with this plan to enchant a cloud creature, which is kind of hard to wrap my head around, right? But they decide to come up with this plan to enchant this creature, and we get some awesome, stuff from classic Loki, some awesome like kind of interaction between Sylvie and who we can consider our Loki, and then they enchant the creature, and a pathway opens up, and we see a castle. Now we kind of got a glimpse of this castle earlier, and it had like a little tower thing with like light coming out of it. And I think in the trailers that this castle is located on what you've seen in the trailers, where it's the asteroid and it looks like this like beam of like light going by it. So the big question is, what is that place and who is in it? Who's the big bad guy? So, so let's kind of put our theories out there, what we think is going to happen in the next episode.
Predictions sure to go wrong.
Oh yeah. Obviously, the biggest prediction is Kang. However, here's the thing. So the castle, and we've seen shots of the interior, is this black, purpley, like this black interior with like this purpley lighting and gold kind of like going through fractures in the walls and stuff. It doesn't feel like Kang to me. When I think Kang, I think very futuristic. I think, I think Chronopolis, and yeah, there are some anachronisms there with like the pyramids and like the Sphinx and whatnot. But I don't see castle. When I see castle, if I have to pick a villain, I choose Doom. But I don't think they would introduce Doctor Doom into this.
Yeah, so like the internet is going ablaze right now. They're like, it's Doom's castle from Latvia, and I'm like, what are you talking?
Yeah, right.
How? Make this connect for me, please.
He does have the time platform thing.
He does.
He does.
So-
Yeah.
And maybe he erased the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
No,
there you go. So
I feel like if you do Doom, you're doing like this weird Secret Wars thing that they just did.
yeah. So I think if it is Kang, which I've actually taken a step back from it being Kang, because I don't know if you could introduce Kang now and then ask people to wait a year till Quantumania.
Or isn't
Like,
it?
I think
is it a year? I thought it was 2023.
Even if it's 2023, that's 3 years. That just exacerbates my point even more.
Yeah,
You're asking people to wait 3 years to bring this character back. I think it's believable. Like, if you think about Kang's character, Kang tries to win. They send him literally to the end of the timeline, and now he's trapped there, right? Now he's got nowhere to go. He can't get back. So the TVA is created as a potential to keep the timeline intact so that he could come back. Plot wise, it makes sense. But to your point, like the environment, the ambiance, I don't know. I actually think, I know this is going to sound really weird, and I think it only could ever be this. I think it's a Loki. I think it's a Loki.
Here's my question for you. Do you think it's a Loki or another Sylvie?
I think that's irrelevant because it's a Loki. Like, it's always going to be. So the only thing I can I think that it's an easy sell if it's Loki's TV show. Loki is neither hero nor villain. We've seen a bunch of them. Why wouldn't it just be another Loki? That it would be a Loki that would have created all of this, even if it was a Loki who. If we're talking about timelines, and one of the things that we like to say is that if you were to move one timeline over, you might not see a difference. You might see one difference, but it might not be a large difference. Maybe this is a Loki that everything happened the same way, but instead of Sylvie surviving, Sylvie doesn't. So now you have a Loki that isn't as soft on connection and experience. And so this is the Loki that's now at the end. They've pruned him, they've sent him to the void. He's at the end of this timeline. He's trying to find a way to get back to where he was at one point or another. I think that for a show that's all about Loki, I don't know if you can take the plot and make it something that's not about Loki. I know it sounds really weird. But I'm really leaning into the narcissism of the character from a fourth wall perspective. It's a Loki show. It's always going to be about Loki. There's no instance in which it wouldn't be about Loki.
I think a couple of people have brought up the whole it's another version of Loki. I don't know. That feels kind of. I don't know if it's too meta, like
on the nose,
right? Like Loki's the hero, the bad guy, the supporting character, and most of the supporting cast.
Now, bear in mind. There are scenes from the trailer. Now, we all know scenes from trailers don't necessarily make it to finished product, but there are scenes of King Loki, King of Asgard, that we have not seen yet. So that could be a hint. Yeah. But it doesn't look like this is Asgard in any way, shape, or form to me. So
yeah,
it doesn't look Asgard. It looks like European.
Yeah,
like Eastern European, Romania, Latveria.
Now, some
here we go. Are you leading into the Doom that they're going to put Doom in this show?
I hope not.
It would make sense. So here's the thing:
I'm just saying the castle looks like it.
Latvian Castle would make sense for Kang as well, because in certain areas of the comics, in certain background histories, Kang is a descendant of not only Reed Richards but Doctor Doom. So that would make sense. But here's the thing. There's another version of Kang that it could be as well, which is Immortus. Now, Immortus was less about conquering time and more about controlling and understanding it. So Immortus
there are multiple Kangs. There are multiple Kangs when you get to Kang, because there's like Iron Lad Kang, Kang the Conqueror, Immortus.
So you would Immortus would be at the end of this, knowing that Kang would be in Quantumania.
Yeah.
So it would just be another version that we would see. Okay.
Yeah. So Immortus is the final evolution of Kang. Like, that's what he thinks he is. Kang is trying to prevent the evolution to Immortus. Immortus is trying to control the timeline to ensure that Kang turns into him. So it's an interesting thing where the Kang fights himself basically in the comics. I never want to become you.
Would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot to pack into one episode, though.
Mm-hmm. True, very true.
Like if they had set up Kang as a character early on, like, oh hey, here's Ravona's boss. This is Kang, and then it was like Kang interprets the will of the Timekeepers. I'd be like, oh okay.
Or even if, say, Immortus was the like shadow guy running the TVA, Kang is a variant that we have not caught yet. He could have been on their most wanted list or whatever, right? They could have done a passing thing there and have been like Kang, here's our most wanted list. Have the shadowy Loki that they don't know who it is, Kang, and then like you could have whoever you want on there. People who are flying around the timeline causing issues. And then Immortus turns out like, yeah, Kang is number one because it's me. I need to make sure he turns into me. That would have been enough, but they haven't done the legwork. You're right. So I could, whereas it would make more sense for the castle. I don't think it
would be very interesting if they did Immortus first and then Kang second. That would be interesting to see. Part of I love the part of the internet that thinks Mobius is going to be in there. There's a part of the internet that thinks that the life that Mobius is pulling from is the life that a Mobius in the castle is feeding to the variants of himself.
So in the comics, there is He Who Remains. He is not a named TVA agent, but he actually created the Timekeepers, but the Timekeepers were like physical organic beings with a lot of power. But at the end of the prior universe, because everything is cyclical, he creates and uses the rest of the energy he has left. He is the last TVA agent, and he creates the Timekeepers. So theoretically, if there was a He Who Remains, it could be a version of a variant of Mobius, if you will.
The original Mobius from the last Mobius from the previous universe.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if Mobius was actually a Celestial that survived the previous universe? And he's just sitting at the end of the world. Wow.
Listen, Loki, I know what you're thinking. Wow. I don't think we're going to.
I'm not joining in on that.
I love the portion of the internet because they are trying to sell so hard that Owen Wilson has one last like trick up his sleeve for the show. But it looks like he and Renslayer are getting ready to butt heads.
Oh yeah,
I'm surprised that. No, go ahead.
Okay, there was a scene from one of the trailers in which we find a Mobius who has loosened up his tie. So, you know, he's bringing the fight, and he's got a pruning stick that's been turned on, and he is like barreling through the TVA, like he's looking for something. So I think that's kind of us seeing him like, you know, just ready to fight people.
I think if there's anything that lends credence to the Kang Immortus kind of narrative, it's that Ravonna Renslayer does not know who's doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's Kang, if you're basing it on the written material, Renslayer is kind of if I'm remembering this correctly, she's kind of like the right hand, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, she basically so they have it's weird. It depends on what timeline we're talking about. So there are some in which they're actually married. There's some where she's just his flame. There's some where she works directly with him. And then there's some where she is a complete antagonist to him. What I find interesting about this Ravonna Renslayer is that, yes, she wants to find who's behind it, but we don't really know her motives. I think, in my opinion, her motives, she wants to keep the TVA intact because she thinks what they do is for good reason. She likes order. However, I think she also wants to find who's in charge behind the scenes so she can take them out herself and then continue the TVA as
supersede the whole thing. Yeah. So like
that's my take.
The only point that I would make for people who want Immortus and Kang to be legitimate, that's the plot that they're going to do, is that if Renslayer, let's say, is working with Kang, and then all of a sudden the Timekeepers are fake, that threatens the Kang that she could be working with or alongside. Yeah. So now who she thinks is the head of the TVA is not. Right? So her journey to figure out who's the one who's been doing all this kind of crosses paths with whatever this is. So, but I personally think it's a Loki. If I had to agree with a potential plot point that wasn't mine, I would say it's probably He That Remains. I would say that is who I think it is. And it wouldn't surprise me if He That Remains is a Loki. Lokis are survivors.
Yeah, maybe it was a Loki who took a TVA deal, right? Right? Like this
And
one.
he existed to the end, and he goes, the TVA has to happen in order for me to survive. I create the TVA.
So, Props, what do you think is going to happen? And what's your out there theory? Like, what do you think logically could happen? And then what is your crazy out there probably
I
not
want
gonna
you to
happen
fan
theory?
Props.
Yeah.
Fanboy a little bit.
Yes. You have an encyclopedic
with the
knowledge,
fanboy.
man, of what goes on. I know.
I want you to really hit me with some, like, for those of you that don't know, Props is very much like whatever is in the guise of what I believe to be real. It's very rare that, like, we get this giddy fandom that comes up and is like, I want it to be this, even if it's 100% wrong. Thanos. No, I'm just kidding.
I blame Aphantasia. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's tough. I mean, pretty good so far about certain things. Like, the audio. Yeah.
No, you're still there. You got a little quiet.
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay. There's like Sylvie being a Loki. I'm glad that actually continued to be true. Like that felt good, which is why I'm kind of hoping it's not a Loki villain, because they already had that are they playing with this being a Loki kind of thing, and we've already moved past that. Sylvie's a Loki. She's her own thing. She's for me, the best thing that they could resolve in an episode that would have closure, probably close to the Immortus angle. Like, you have one guy who figured out that for his existence, that organization had to exist. I'm kind of hoping that Mobius is actually like working towards maybe like is like a variant Kang. Like that would be my like super weird one. And, like Mortis created him and he's like trying to guide him to eventually become potentially another what he needs him to be.
Yeah. But Mobius just won't do it, so that's what leads to Jonathan Majors' version of Kang.
Right. And so he just keeps trying to create the thing that he needs to exist. Like to your thing about like Immortus doing that. But there are too many, like you mentioned, Alioth is a giant Kang thing. Ravonna is a giant Kang thing. Like there are a whole bunch of Kang breadcrumbs. My big thing though is just with one episode of closure. Like how are they going to finish off that? It feel like a good ending. And still, like to your point, Joe, we're not going to see Kang for another 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, how's that going to feel?
And possibly lead into a second season of this, because
you might get a second season of Loki before you get Kang in Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Right.
So
then the flip side of that though too is Kang appearing in Ant-Man is in the core timeline.
Mm-hmm.
All us as viewers will have seen Immortus and or Kang in these TV shows that like they're going to have to reintroduce the character to Ant-Man in the core timeline.
Mm-hmm.
We're already going to be familiar.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But yeah, I think the easiest one is Immortus.
Yeah.
That's the cleanest. If it were my out there theory, they get there and it's Jack Kirby. Fantastic Four I can't remember the exact issue, where they went and they found God, and it was Jack Kirby on the phone with Stan Lee. Just, hey, okay, the Silver Surfer's going here, and that's my out there fanboy.
There it is.
Crazy.
I'm racking my brain of what is actually like what falls into the criteria of that it could potentially be, but it's so unique. I think to your point, I think the Immortus one is the cleanest. That Immortus is essentially, I need to do everything I can to keep this timeline intact because it allows the younger version of me to exist so that I continue to exist. This obsession over my existence is the foundation of everything.
So that's where I think all these people who think it's Kang, where if it's at least Immortus, they go, oh, okay, same person basically. That's a win.
If you're a viewer, you don't care one, like if you have no frame of reference for this, you don't care one way or the other. But if you're a fan, you might go, oh, it's Immortus, which means the Kang that we do see is gonna be what he's working towards, what he's working against.
It's hard to see. It's hard to frame stuff in the fan theory, just because like Immortus is a character, but he's a very like tiny one. Like he was important in his arc, but he's not like Doctor Doom or like even Kang the Conqueror. He's been around for forever. But if I went to random Joe Schmo on like even kind of comic book reader, if they hadn't read Fantastic Four or some very limited arcs of the Avengers, they're not going to have any idea who Kang the Conqueror is.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at what WandaVision did with like Agatha Harkness. Most people aren't going to know Agatha Harkness, you know. But that took a whole series where she existed in that series, episode to episode, and we knew something was sus about her, you know.
But to your point about that, like I remember people were watching WandaVision saying that Ultron was gonna like come back, but that's because fan bases that exist in the gray area are only going to relate what they know.
Yeah.
So they're like, Kang is not part of the conversation if you're like in the weird gray area of not knowing who Kang is. So you're only gonna say, well, be in the castle, like that's where like Doctor Doom conversations come up, and like, it's going to be a variant of Thanos, and like all this other like these things that regardless of whether they make sense or not, it's the material that I know. But WandaVision proved that you could take a character that might not be as well known and ensure that their narrative means something. And I think Immortus is a good selection of a villain for the TV platform.
Yeah.
It's much harder if you're trying to do it in an Ant-Man film all at once. Kang might be the exception because some people know him and he was a villain in a Lego Marvel video game, and like so they're starting to introduce him in different forms of media. But like Immortus is a completely different conversation, to your point. Like he's so small that it might make sense to introduce him in a TV show. But it also, like, if it turns out that that's true and you go to watch Ant-Man, all of a sudden Loki is forced source material. Like you have to then watch Loki to ensure that a movie makes sense, and that might not be what Kevin Feige wants. As much as we love the TV shows and as much as we love Disney Plus, that might not be the best formula to make small screen the founding source material for big screen content. You know,
what if it's
you're doing it with WandaVision?
What if it's Modoc?
Yo,
just
right?
Patton Oswalt. Right? Patton Oswalt in a Modoc costume.
I would lose my mind if the TVA was just this universe's version of AIM.
Yeah.
And it's eventually what AIM became after Aldrich Killian was. How out of left field would that be?
Just put it out, the Timekeepers were robots.
And they're all humans. That was a point, Props, that you made during the episode. What is all humans? Though I did spot at one point during the show, during the episode, the Dark Aster, what looked to be the Dark Aster, Ronin ship in the ground. So that was one of the few, aside from the Thanos copter, which was such a great Easter egg, one of the few non-human things. And the Thanos copter is debatable because it could just have been a human helicopter that a human painted.
Mjolnir was in the ground, but the Dark Aster was in the ground. Mm-hmm. So it's just it's super. If it's MODOK, holy I'm gonna throw something across the room. I will ascend to the heavens.
I saw some out there theory. This is the one of the crazier out there theories is that it's actually a variant of Thor who became the god of mischief, and I think that's just way too much to work with in one episode. Like, that's a lot to work with.
I'm not gonna lie. If in that castle it's Chris Hemsworth and he's like, "I'm running the TVA," I'd be okay with that.
No, I'm the god of mischief, thunderous mischief. That would be crazy. That would be kind of crazy. Who knows? I highly doubt that, but I'm a muscly god of thunderous mischief. So let's kind of have a short conversation, just real quick, on how this does bleed into, or how the fandom thinks that this is going to bleed into the next few movies. So a lot of people think that this is going to tie directly into the Multiverse of Madness, as well as No Way Home for Spider-Man. Being that now, essentially, if we see the fall of the TVA, which I think it's coming, like a freight train, that we will see these variants. We will see, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and all these villains because of the events of this show. Or you might see one because of the other. You might see Multiverse of Madness because of the show. What do we think? What do we think? Do we think that they're that closely tied together? I mean, it would make sense.
I think it makes sense for No Way Home.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this is just me, I think it makes less sense because Multiverse of Madness will have the Darkhold. And the Darkhold can be the defining factor for anything you do. Yeah. Right. So there's enough power in this one movie in and of itself that you don't need Loki to be the establishing reason. Wanda could be the reason. The Darkhold could be the reason. The existence of the multiverse could be the reason. Now that I think to the point I made earlier, this could be the origin point. Right. But I think there's enough happening in that film that could be that it could define kind of whatever the reasoning is. I think for No Way Home, it makes a lot more sense because if you look at that film in a vacuum, there's nothing that we've seen in any of the previous Tom Holland Spider-Man films that would establish the why behind why this would take place. Mm-hmm. Right? Peter's not running around with a book that allows him to do literally anything. He's not like... He hasn't interacted with anyone yet. So that to me makes a lot of sense that the events of Loki would lead to a film that is going to take place in 5 months, and would kind of be fresh on people's minds. So that to me makes sense. The Multiverse of Madness one makes a little less sense. It's possible, but I think there's enough in that film that could establish the why behind whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, there are a couple key points. One, there's a Nexus was one of those weird adverts in
WandaVision.
In WandaVision. So I feel like they've and we know that the next movie scene is called Multiverse of Madness. And I think there was a point where Miss Minutes propaganda movie even said this causes a multiverse of madness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're
essentially what Sylvie did is the idea.
So I agree. I agree with Diamond that the primary push of the movie doesn't need to be a TV show. I'm kind of hoping the way, and who knows if this is going to be the way they do it. But I mean, if you look at WandaVision, at the end of Wanda's story in Endgame, the last time we saw her, we knew she was super powerful, and Vision was dead. At the end of WandaVision, Wanda's super powerful. Vision is dead. There was a government program to create a new Vision. That's the only new addition that happened from WandaVision. I mean, there's the Darkholme book thing and that she's more magical, but I mean, like, all you need to know is that she's super powerful. That she found a book that makes her even more so.
And Vision is dead.
And Vision, right. Falcon, Winter Soldier. At the end of Endgame, Falcon had the shield. Bucky was his buddy. Captain America isn't a thing. At the end of Falcon, Winter Soldier, Falcon has the shield. Bucky is his buddy. Captain America, Steve Rogers isn't a thing. So that we pretty much just got to where we thought he was going to be at the end of Endgame when he was handed the shield. They didn't really introduce anything new there other than the fact that Sharon Carter is apparently a bad guy, which I'm not bought into. So we'll see what happens there. Please, Thunderbolts.
I would just like hope that she's deep cover.
Right. I gotta hope. I don't know. Either that or she's a Skrull. I don't know.
No, it could be. Yeah.
I think there was a point where they were talking about, like, we don't know if we had enough time to really give her story justice. And I really want to be like, unfortunately, no. Like, I don't buy her being the power broker. Can she play it? Sure. Do I buy it? I didn't see enough. And then in this one, how much are you going to have to watch Loki to understand what's happening in the movies? So far, I don't think the TV shows have been necessary. And I think they're going to try to keep with that formula. Because if you don't subscribe to Disney Plus, there's no way to consume this media.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't expect everybody to sign up for that service.
And in some countries, Disney Plus doesn't exist yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are movies that billions of people, or like millions of billions of people, are going to see. And if some of the content to understand what's happening is gated behind a subscription service that may not be available everywhere, they're not going to be able to do that. So I do not think they're going to make Loki necessary to understand what's happening. They can't.
Maybe in addition to.
And you know what that's called? That's called Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people like Age of Ultron. I love Age of Ultron. Not a lot of people like it because you had to watch season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to understand the beginning of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the last time they did it. So now I can understand why Feige would want to do it this time around because they have control of the content. But to Props's point, this is on a paid platform. This isn't ABC, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lot less eyes on this material. But regardless of the circumstance, like I do still think Immortus to some extent can work even in that formula because the end of Kang's arc isn't necessary when you see him in Ant-Man.
Right.
Right? That's like reading the end of the book. That doesn't mean you are removed from the responsibility of reading the beginning just because you know what the end is. So I'm very interested to see how they twist it together, but it's very hard for me. Like that's why I landed on Loki. I think that's the safest. I think it's the safest thing is that it turns out it's a Loki. Everything is in universe. Everything is in house. And it fits the narcissistic nature of the character that, surprise, surprise, who'd you think it was going to be? You know?
Yeah. I just think, one, it's too easy.
Very much so.
And
it's not just easy, it's literal.
Yeah, right. And
it's
two, like...
It's literally Loki's show.
Yeah. And very much what Props said. I really hope it's not because then he's the protagonist, the antagonist, the supporting cast. He's everyone.
I kind of secretly love that. Like, hey, we're watching Loki's debut on Disney Plus. Yeah, Loki is everyone. He's every character except for Mobius and a couple other characters. But
he could be Mobius.
He's a hero. He's a villain. He's a supporting actor. Imagine if like there was a Deadpool-esque award show at the end, and it was best lead actor, best supporting actor, best supporting cast, best whatever, and it's all Loki. It's every single winner is Loki. It only makes sense in the narcissistic nature. He even says that it's funny, it's out of context, but President Loki says it when they show in the promo where he's just kind of standing there and he's like, were you surprised?
Like, yeah, really? What did you expect? Yeah.
What did you expect? That's I don't know. That's how I feel. I feel like this is a what did you expect kind of situation.
Yeah.
He said, I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. My thing is that, like,
I don't like it.
Do I think Tom Hiddleston could pull it off? Sure. Or if they brought back Richard E. Grant and it was an older Loki again, do I think they could pull it off? Totally.
Some people aren't thinking that because they're like, you don't just use Richard E. Grant for one episode. You get as much out of him as you can. And I said, okay.
I think he'd be surprised that Disney would do that. They would be like, okay, who's the best person? They're like, that guy? Cool. Throw him money.
Yeah.
One episode happened.
And then he goes.
And he did an amazing job again. But yeah, I mean, it's it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, it's the world is our oyster, as it were. Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
But I can't wait to see, and that'll be next Wednesday. Exciting. So I guess that's it for our discussion on Loki. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'm hoping it ends on a good note because apparently we are getting a second season. But along with what others have said, I really hope it doesn't tie too much into the movies, like to be required, because again, not everyone's going to have access to it. But I think it's been an amazing show, and for me, has been some of the best Disney Plus writing and just directing. There's a clear vision for the show, and you can tell in every episode. That and the soundtrack, so good. It has been amazing.
I personally wish that they would they after the series is up, they take all the episodes, they remove the credits, and then they after that final episode, it's just like you can watch it all at once.
Oh, someone's going to do that cut. You know it.
Yeah. I wish that was something on Disney Plus that hey, if I want to watch Loki as a movie style kind of situation, I could just play it all at once without the credits in between.
Mm-hmm. That would be awesome.
Disney.
Maybe.
Get on the horn. Call us.
Come on.
We've got ideas.
I got great ideas for infrastructure.
You're doing the wrong generation. There's a whole bunch of people that have no idea what this means.
Hey, Disney.
Text me. TikTok, Snapchat. What do you got? Instagram.
Text me. Call me. Hello. Yeah.
All right. Well, hello? from me, from Diamond, and from Props, it's been a pleasure. And see y'all later.
Hello.
Toodle.